long before Bungie had you drifting across the beach on the Silent Cartographer mission in the original Halo, or taking down Crota with some cohesive teamwork and DPS tactics in Destiny, there was Marathon. From rough beginnings in a Bungie office that's completely unrecognisable from what we know today, Marathon was born. While not Bungie's first title even, Marathon became the title that would catapult Bungie on a trajectory that has led us all to be either creating this video today, like me, or clicking on it, like you. Please like and subscribe, inflation is outside and it's coming to get me. And before getting properly into it, I think it's really worth highlighting that I am choosing to focus on a brand new, largely unknown IP reboot from Bungie on the same week that this happened.
Yeah, me too, kiddo.
Pretty crazy considering how big of a deal that is for a lot of Destiny and just Bungie community members in general. I think it just really highlights how fantastic Bungie's reveal of Marathon has been. Short, beautiful, and honestly tantalizing teaser, followed up by a shadow dropped Vidoc in the classic Bungie formula. I mean, just look at the YouTube views on the reveals of both of those games. Something is definitely working for Bungie right now. So, what the hell is Marathon? Launched on December 1st, 1994, the original Marathon solidified both Bungie and the game series itself as important frames on the gaming FPS timeline. While actually launching on the Mac, Marathon still managed to push boundaries set by other FPS contemporaries at the time by creating diverse, fully textured 3D environments, interesting enemy and level designs, an immersive and fun storyline, something new to shooters at the time, and yeah, even the ability to look up.
Similar games of the time would only allow you to look from side to side. Marathon used a clever parallax effect to allow you to look up and down.
Yeah, it's weird to think that that was once a feature. Like, imagine it now, Destiny 3 is confirmed and they include in the patch notes or the feature list that, you know, you can now independently both look and aim. Anyway, modern Bungie fans probably associate several key features of their games that you might consider flagship features of a Bungie product. These include, but are not limited to, a fluid, satisfying and addictive FPS gameplay. I mean, just look at Destiny, the gameplay is probably the only thing you can confidently say in public, you know, quote unquote, is good without risking public humiliation and torture. Not to mention what would happen to your Reddit karma. Secondly, a killer soundtrack. I mean, who does not recognize those monks singing from Halo? Honestly, it's iconic. Third and finally, an engaging story built up by interesting characters, an absurdly dense lore, and probably, most importantly in my eyes, outstanding environmental storytelling. And taking the original Marathon game into account, you can actually still see precursors to all of these core elements that we discussed when speaking about a modern Bungie title. Going even further, you can see literal reiterations of certain elements that Bungie would later reuse and improve upon. For example, the story has you play as an unnamed security officer aboard the UESC Marathon. Sound familiar? The Marathon gets attacked by a hostile race of alien slavers known as the Four. Anyway, you get it. They enslave and force other races to fight for them as they spread across the galaxy. How about this? Familiar? To make things more complicated, an onboard AI called Durandal goes rogue and starts to toy with the player as they progress through the ship because he secretly wants to contact an ancient, extinct, alien civilization with immense time and space-bending power. Come on. So, given that brief summary of what Marathon was, what is Marathon going to be? Well, straight off the bat, one of the most controversial talking points surrounding Marathon lately is that it's going to be an extraction shooter. For the uninitiated, an extraction shooter is a relatively new addition to the PvP FPS space. The gameplay of an extraction shooter largely revolves around 3 core gameplay elements that I just made up and are now definitive, so deal with it. The first would be the gearing up phase. The player generally has access to a kind of stash, inventory, or store system that allows them to hoard, customize, buy, sell weapons and loot required to play the game competitively. Players generally customize their character with that gear that has been either looted in-game purchased or stolen from enemy players that they have killed. This is then brought into the game. Second phase, compete for objectives. Player enters a play space that is comparatively quite large when compared to a traditional PvP map, where they are tasked with either completing certain subtasks, eliminating PvE bosses, or scavenging for lucrative loot or quest items. While the players complete these objectives, they also compete against other players or teams who are all fighting for the same resources. Generally speaking, if you die in an extraction shooter, you lose everything that you carried, both your newly collected loot and whatever you brought in with you on the way. The third and final phase is extraction. So to, quote unquote win the game, players generally need to complete an extraction. This is commonly a randomized but predetermined exit point on the map that the player must navigate to while under duress from both PvP, PvE and time elements. Sounds pretty chill, right? The budding genre has been popularized, often notoriously so, by titles like Escape from Tarkov, Hunt Showdown, The Division, and Call of Duty's DMZ. Games like Escape from Tarkov represent the extreme end of the scale in terms of player accessibility and in-game risk. That is often the decreed reason players tend to avoid extraction shooters, or it has a bad name. Oppositely, COD DMZ has brought the perhaps niche game mode to the AAA main stage by offering players a more casual look at what it has to offer. What do I mean when I say player accessibility and in-game risk? Well, Escape from Tarkov scares away a large proportion of people due to how hardcore its gameplay loop really is. The game requires players to complete in-game bounties, take down tough PvE bosses, or find rare and hard to find loot items to progress their character. Issues start when players are incentivized to spend up to 30 minutes before entering a raid to perfectly gear up their character, have him ready, only to be instantly domed by another player 30 seconds into the match, losing everything. Next thing, they're back at the menu, looking forward to another 30 minutes in their inventory. Call of Duty has tackled this with their new DMZ mode by lowering the risk and promoting faster queue times and reducing the general stress of the game to dispel any worries their player base may have about how scary extraction shooters can be. The issue with Call of Duty's method is that the mode loses the most important strength an extraction shooter has, the thrill. So while Escape from Tarkov may sound brutal, unrewarding, and more often than not pretty frustrating, the one secret sauce it has that almost no other game that I have played has been able to reproduce is its tension and excitement. The pure adrenaline rush you receive when you go into a raid with a low-level gear character, you manage to take down a thick Chad, a big boy raider, and you stealthily navigate to the extraction, barely making out alive, running from PvE, PvP players. The sigh of relief as you just see that raid end screen pop up is honestly quite special. Where Marathon really needs to hit the ground running, in my opinion, is it has to perfect the balance between these two extremes of extraction gaming. Can Bungie make the round-to-round momentum feel fluid to the average FPS player while also creating that excitement, tension and reward from a successful Tarkov raid? That remains to be seen, but if they do pull it off, we may well see the first AAA mainstream extraction shooter that could change the genre forever. So, aside from balancing the pain and replayability, what else can Bungie bring to the table? Bungie have already stated that their newest Marathon entry will not be a direct sequel or prequel to the original games, but it will belong in the same universe. Taking place in the Tau Ceti system, Bungie will enhance the narrative and lore of the world through player interactions with a persistent world. Marathon will be a multiplayer-only title, meaning that all narrative beats must be delivered to the player through environmental and expositive means. Bungie are not the first studio to have tried this, and in fact Respawn made Titanfall 1 a multiplayer-only title with narrative being drip-fed to the players in a similar way. Unfortunately, in this case, the experiment largely failed, and when Titanfall 2 came around the corner, it included a fully fledged campaign with a normal narrative style that went down as one of the best FPS single-player campaigns of all time. Hopefully Bungie can fully leverage their storytelling talents to ensure Marathon does not suffer the same fate. Bungie have already literally coined the term World's First when speaking about Marathon. That's a word familiar to any Destiny raider or probably any Destiny player. This, alongside Bungie's use of terms like infamy and fame suggest player will be competing for similar titles and fast completions of certain in-game tasks. In terms of what we can expect from gameplay itself, we really don't know much. Players will be hunting for a form of loot called artifacts. These artifacts seem to be found in pieces that can be combined to increase their strength or value. Presumably this will also place a giant red X on your head for the other teams in the game. Interestingly, Bungie has reiterated that escaping alive is not the only way to win in Marathon. What this means for the gameplay loop is not really clear, but it seems to be straying away at least a little from the core formula of extraction shooters. In terms of visuals, the game also seems to be stepping away from the original palette used in the previous entries in the franchise. The teaser revealed an extremely pristine, clean sci-fi look that is vastly different from the dark, gritty, and maybe even muddy colorscape seen in Marathon previously. The closest title that comes to my mind with the new art style is Mirror's Edge, albeit Marathon has seemingly taken the clean elements from Mirror's Edge and sort of transposed them over a cyberpunk aesthetic. Another factor from the trailer that immediately grabbed me and that I know will be very important to the gameplay was the soundtrack. The new trailer soundtrack is a hard-hitting, cyberpunk-infused, glitchy earworm that you've been graced with hearing in the past minutes of this video. I don't really need to go into too much detail about why this likely will stand side by side with some of the iconic tracks Bungie have graced us with over the recent years. So, Marathon's visual style, its music, its gunplay, and its world building all seem like low-hanging fruit for Bungie that they could very easily knock out of the park. I think it's fair to say the game is, and should be, grabbing the attention of not only extraction shooter fans, but FPS fans in general. If Bungie can, sort of normalize extraction game mechanics to a mainstream audience without compromising the integral parts of those games that make them tick, we could be in for a pretty big hit. All this being said, there are still some very key questions that remain to be answered about the title and about Bungie in general. I mean, what about Destiny 2? What about Destiny 3? Is this why Bungie has enraged the Destiny PvP community for years now? They're all working on their new multiplayer shooter. How exactly will the gameplay loop function, and will there be aggressive microtransactions and games as a service experiences? Another super important note is that Bungie has highlighted that due to Marathon being a multiplayer only title, it will feature all the bells and whistles of a AAA PvP experience. This includes dedicated servers and, critically, a vigorous anti-cheat system. Player connection and anti-cheat could not be more important to Marathon if it wishes to succeed. Other extraction games like Tarkov have been plagued by connectivity and cheating issues, something exacerbated by the high-risk gameplay core to their design. This should be, and seemingly is, a priority for Bungie. Hopefully it won't be long until we find out more, but as Bungie has explicitly stated, the next time we hear from them about this game, it's going to be when they're ready to reveal gameplay. My bet is that won't be till after the last expansion in Destiny 2. Overall, I'm really excited for the future of the game, and if you made it all the way here, I mean genuinely, if you made it all the way to this point, thank you so much for listening. More Destiny and more Marathon content is coming on the horizon for me. Bye bye.